My wife's sister laughed at my simple wedding compared to her lavish one, but now blames me because I used my fund to buy a house while she has to repay everything. Right now, I've got to tell you about all the chaos my sister has stirred up, and believe me, none of it is my fault. I've never met anyone so entitled who refuses to take responsibility for her own actions. She's absolutely determined to blame me for her bad choices because apparently, I didn't guide her properly. And you might wonder, how exactly is that my fault? Well, according to her, it's because I didn't advise her correctly, as I'm supposedly supposed to do as her older sister. And sure, she's not entirely wrong that I could have given her advice, but come on, it's not like she ever listens anyway. What she really wants is someone to blame, because her life is a mess and she can't handle the consequences of her own decisions. Anyway, let me explain what's going on so you can judge for yourselves. My husband and I think her logic is completely insane, and we honestly need someone to confirm just how delusional she's being. So, about a year and a half ago, I married my long-term boyfriend. We had a very small, intimate wedding, and we don't regret it one bit. In fact, even if we could do it again, we wouldn't make it any bigger. We'd keep the same guest list and stay on a modest budget. Personally, I'd rather have a simple wedding surrounded by people who genuinely love me than a huge, exhausting, expensive event. Everyone's different, and I don't judge anyone for wanting something else. But for us, after being together so long, we didn't feel the need for some extravagant ceremony. It was more of a heartfelt celebration of our commitment and the start of our life together. Because what's the point of celebrating eternal union if you end up broke right after? So, we kept things reasonable and responsible, 2 words I'm pretty sure my sisters never even heard of. Both our parents decided to pitch in and cover the wedding expenses, so we barely spent anything from our own pockets. That was even more reason to stay within budget. We didn't want to take advantage of anyone's generosity or burden my in-laws financially. To me, that seemed totally normal, but apparently not everyone thinks the same way. Here's where it gets important. Our parents had set up 2 separate wedding funds, one for me and one for my sister. My dad's an oncologist, and my mom's a divorce lawyer, so yeah, we grew up pretty comfortable. They always made sure we never had to worry about money and even saved for big future events like our weddings. Since I used only a small portion of my wedding fund, my parents told me they'd keep the rest for me to use whenever I needed it. That was honestly one of the best parts of keeping the wedding small. I didn't burn through all the money they'd saved, and it would still be there for something meaningful later on. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, my husband and I finally decided it was time to use that money. We were ready to buy a house and become homeowners. The only reason we hadn't done it earlier was because our apartment was conveniently close to his job, and we didn't feel any rush to move. But that changed recently when I found out I'm pregnant. Within days, we both agreed it was time to move. It was perfect timing, really. My husband had just been promoted and assigned to another office across the city. We started house hunting in that area since it was close to his new job, and by some miracle, everything lined up. The neighborhood we found was also near our friends and my parents, so it just made sense. We used the wedding fund and some of our savings, and we bought a beautiful little house in a lovely area. The sale closed just a few days ago, and we announced it on social media along with the pregnancy news. Everyone, including our parents, was thrilled for us. Everyone, except my sister. I honestly don't know what got into her. Well, actually, I do. Jealousy. Plain and simple. She's been acting completely ridiculous, accusing me of betraying her and making her look stupid because, apparently, I didn't warn her to save money instead of blowing it all on her wedding. Let me put this in perspective. She's only 3 years younger than me. So you'd think someone that close to my age would have the basic common sense not to spend every penny on one day if they can't afford it. But no, she absolutely doesn't. She runs her own little business making handbags and shoes, but honestly, the quality isn't great. Even I wouldn't buy them. They fall apart quickly and are overpriced. She's been doing that for 2 years, but it's not going well. She's been married for about 6 months now, to a guy she's been with for 3 years, and he's useless. At least she works and earns something. He completely depends on her financially. I wish I could say he makes up for it by handling things at home, but nope, he just sits around, trying to become a streamer, now. Before that, he'd bounce from job to job, getting fired every few months. My parents weren't exactly thrilled about the marriage, but my sister insisted. And now she's stuck with a man-child who doesn't even help around the house. So, she comes home exhausted from work, does all the chores herself, and complains non-stop. Honestly, I don't know what she ever saw in him, but it's not my problem. What is my problem is that she's trying to make it my problem. She's always been bitter and resentful, and I think that's a huge part of why she's so mad at me now. But what's crazy is that, if anything, I should be the one upset with her, not the other way around. She came to my wedding and mocked everything, made snide comments because it was small and not fancy enough for her taste. She cracked inappropriate jokes, made everyone uncomfortable, and I didn't even confront her about it because it didn't seem worth it. At the time, I didn't even notice. My friends and some relatives told me later. And by then, I figured bringing it up would only make her defensive and claim she was just joking. That's how she's always been. My sister has this habit of making snide comments about people, their looks, their teeth, whatever, and when they understandably get offended, she laughs it off, saying she was just joking. Then she twists it so they look uptight for not having a sense of humor. Like she's the normal one and everyone else is too sensitive. So yeah, I never confronted her about it. I just let it go. But I always knew that during my wedding, she had plenty to say, mostly about how hers was going to be different, bigger, and better. She made it very clear that she was planning to make the most of the wedding fund our parents had set aside for her, unlike me. And for some bizarre reason, she assumed that maybe I hadn't even received the money my parents had saved for me. I have no idea where that came from. Our parents have never shown favoritism, so I honestly don't know what gave her that idea. But since I never talked to her about it, I never had the chance to correct her. And now, she's using that against me, claiming I had deceived her by letting her believe our parents didn't bother saving anything for my wedding, even though I never said that. She literally made up that story herself and fell for her own lie. Anyway, that's one part of the problem. The other part is that she went all out with her own wedding, a huge, fancy event with her now husband, and our parents ended up paying for everything. So naturally, she burned through her entire wedding fund in one single day. There's nothing left. And even though our parents are well off, they've always taught us to be responsible with money. They've made it clear that we should never rely on them financially unless we're in a real emergency. And let's be honest, anyone who knows my sister's situation would agree that she's not in an emergency. She's in a mess of her own making. She knows her business is struggling, but she still refuses to change direction. She also never insists that her husband contribute to the household finances, not even a little. So of course she's too embarrassed to ask our parents for help, because she knows that even if they do lend her money, it'll come with a long lecture about how she got herself into this situation. She won't admit it, but I know her well enough to say that's exactly what's going on. Anyway, after my big announcement, the pregnancy and the new house, she called me. I thought it was to congratulate me. But no. She immediately started picking a fight and throwing all these accusations I just mentioned. It caught me completely off guard. At first, I tried to listen, but then I snapped out of it and told her, this isn't the hotline for nonsense, and hung up. You'd think that would have been the end of it. She said her piece, got it out of her system, right? But nope. She called back to tell me I was rude and disrespectful for hanging up on her, and that I owed her an apology, not just for that, but for misleading her all these years, for making her believe our parents hadn't set aside money for me, and for letting her think that's why I had such a small wedding. She basically blames me for her financial problems, says I'm the villain because I didn't guide her properly or tell her that I saved part of my wedding fund so I could someday buy a house. According to her, if she'd known that was my plan, she would have done the same. And now, apparently, it's my fault she has to pay rent every month. This woman spent the last 6 months bragging to everyone about her glamorous wedding, acting like her life was perfect, and yet somehow, I'm the bad guy. I just don't get it. I don't understand how anyone could twist things that far. I know she's taking out her frustration on me, but it's still absurd and exhausting. I haven't told anyone about this yet except my husband, but honestly, if she doesn't stop soon, I might tell our parents. She's been harassing me non-stop since the announcement, calling, texting, even using other phone numbers when I block her. I'm pretty sure she's borrowing her friends' phones now. Every time she reaches me, it's the same thing. How disappointed she is in me, how I'm a terrible sister, how I'm jealous of her, and how I supposedly stayed quiet while she made bad choices instead of guiding her. It's ridiculous. I hate the idea of tattling to our parents like we're children, but I don't know what else to do at this point. Because clearly, the only other solution would be to give her my house, since apparently I'm to blame for everything and that would magically fix her brain malfunction. The only reason I haven't told our parents yet is because I know they'll give her an ultimatum, and that might actually make things worse for her. She's running out of options, and my parents are probably her only hope of getting out of her financial hole without going further into debt. But knowing her, instead of apologizing, she'll double down out of pride and make everything worse, possibly ruining her relationship with them completely. And honestly, I don't want that. Not for her, not for anyone. That's the only thing holding me back. Because I know my sister tends to self-destruct, and if that happens again, I'll end up feeling guilty, and I don't want that. I've told her several times to stop, but she won't listen. She keeps demanding that I apologize, but that's where I draw the line. I'm not going to say sorry for something I didn't do. I've done nothing wrong. She's the one who owes me an apology. Even after everything she's said and done, I still care about her. But apparently, that's never enough. So yeah, that's where things stand. And according to her logic, if I dare tell our parents about her ridiculous behavior, I'm the bad guy again. Update 1. I ended up talking to my parents, even though I said I'd wait to read the comments first, because honestly, my sister just pushed me to my limit. So I told them everything that's been going on. That was yesterday. After hearing me out, they said they'd talk to her and try to get her to stop somehow. And look, I know some people in the comments probably think it was childish of me to run to my parents the moment things got bad, but I can't help it. My sister and I grew up very close to them. They've always been a huge part of our lives, and even now, as adults, we have the kind of relationship where we truly trust their judgment. They always want the best for us, and we make an effort to listen and take their advice seriously. So I knew that if anyone could get my sister to stop harassing me, it would be our parents. And she knows that too. I guess she didn't expect me to actually go to them, because just a couple of hours ago, she sent me a message saying she wouldn't text me anymore, apparently because I'm a coward who can't face her own faults. According to her, that's why I ran to mommy and daddy to complain about her instead of handling things myself. I honestly don't know what she expected. It was pretty dumb of her to keep demanding an apology when she knew perfectly well I hadn't done anything wrong. I made it clear from the start that I didn't want to keep engaging or dragging this out, but she kept pushing, so naturally, I had to do something. She has no right to blame me for that. Now I just hope she actually sticks to what she said and stops contacting me, because I really don't want this to drag on any longer than it already has. I haven't spoken to my parents yet to find out how their talk with her went. I've been busy with work, but I'm going to call them in a few minutes and will post an update after that, since I know a lot of people have been following this story. To be honest, writing these updates helps me vent, so, why not? Anyway, I'll check back soon. Thank you to everyone who commented on my last post, offered advice, or even just took the time to read and respond. It truly means a lot to me. Update 2. I spoke with my parents a couple of hours ago, and here's what they told me. Of course, the first thing I asked was what kind of conversation they had with my sister after I talked to them. They said that when they called her and confronted her with everything I'd told them, she immediately started denying it. Obviously, they knew she was lying. They pressed a little harder, and eventually, she admitted that everything they accused her of was true, but then she tried to twist it, saying it wasn't their business. According to her, it was between her and me, and they shouldn't get involved since we're both adults who should be able to handle things on our own. Naturally, my parents reminded her that I asked for their help, and that they are adults too, and if they feel the need to step in, they will, because no matter how old we get, we'll always be their daughters. And if we're fighting like children, it's their duty as parents to help us work things out. They told her directly that her behavior wasn't normal, that she was acting ridiculous, entitled, and disrespectful, and that her personal shortcomings weren't anyone else's fault. She couldn't just go around blaming others and making everyone miserable just because her own life wasn't going well. She didn't know how to respond. She clearly hadn't expected them to be so brutally honest. She told them they were being horrible to her, and apparently, she was on the verge of tears, but they had to give her some tough love. They told her it was time to accept that her life wasn't turning out the way she had imagined, and that was perfectly fine. What wasn't fine was blaming other people for it. They reminded her that she had created her own situation, and worse, she was actively refusing to do anything to fix it. That kind of denial would only make things worse. They told her that running away from her problems and refusing to face reality wouldn't help, it would just keep hurting her. And since she was already hurting, she was trying to hurt me too, which was exactly what this whole mess was about. They didn't sugarcoat anything. They told her straight up that she'd been careless with her life and needed to finally take responsibility, to stop wallowing in resentment and dragging everyone else down with her. She couldn't keep turning her personal problems into everyone else's problem with this unreasonable, childish behavior. Naturally, that was too bitter a pill for her to swallow. She didn't take it well. She started yelling at them, accusing them of being unfair, and said she knew exactly what their real issue was, that they were just mad because she married someone she truly loved instead of someone rich, like they supposedly wanted. And let me tell you, that doesn't even make sense. My husband isn't rich, and he doesn't come from some wealthy family. His parents are just regular, hardworking people. I adore them, and we get along great. My parents had no problem with him or his family either. You know why? Because there's a difference. My husband isn't lazy like my brother-in-law. He's hardworking, honest, responsible, and would never fail me or anyone the way my sister's husband has. Naturally, my parents felt much more comfortable welcoming him, and his family, into ours. They even mentioned that to her. My parents can have money, sure, but they've never judged people by their wealth. The only thing they've ever wanted for us was to marry someone good, someone kind, protective, and decent. And my in-laws raised exactly that kind of man. I can't say the same about my sister's in-laws, but that's another story. My sister, of course, didn't want to hear any of it. She kept shouting, insisting they were attacking her just because she married for love, and claiming they'd never accept that. She said they just wanted an excuse to blame everything on her husband. Then out of nowhere, she started yelling that she knew she should have never accepted the wedding fund, that she should have known they'd throw it in her face and expect her to act like an obedient little dog, just because they paid for it. That came completely out of nowhere. My parents hadn't even brought up the money. My sister just has this habit of creating enemies in her head to make herself feel like she's fighting some noble battle. She could literally walk past a baby that looks at her the wrong way and convince herself it's the reincarnation of her ex, just so she can justify hating it. Our parents also paid for our education, and they never threw that in our faces. So why would they start now? It was pure insecurity speaking, and it showed. Anyway, the conversation didn't end well. My parents told her they'd said what they needed to say, and it was now up to her whether she wanted to change her life or not. If she didn't, that was her loss, not theirs. They'd already done everything possible to give her a good start in life. From here on out, it was on her to build something better for herself. And then they hung up. Honestly, she's been making one foolish decision after another, and I'm sure she's going to regret it. But it seems she's made her choice, and I don't think I'm going to say anything more to her. Whatever she does from now on, that's on her. Update 3. It's been about 3 weeks since my last update, and a couple of days ago, we hosted a small get-together at our house. We invited some friends and family to celebrate finally becoming homeowners. You could call it a mix between a housewarming party and a baby shower. We like to keep things efficient. Honestly, it was more of a celebration of life in general. Things have been going so well lately, and we wanted to take a moment to enjoy it and be grateful. We invited friends and relatives from both sides, mine and my husband's. When I say, my side, that really just means my parents and a couple of close relatives. I had no intention whatsoever of inviting my sister or my brother-in-law. And since a few people in the comments mentioned that maybe my sister isn't the real problem, but that her husband is the one pulling the strings, let me just say this, maybe you're right, but she still chooses to act the way she does. Nobody forced her to make those snide comments at my wedding. That was all her. She's been locked in this one-sided competition with me, as if we're both trying to prove who has the better life. The problem is, I'm not even playing that game. But she's furious because, sure, maybe she won the wedding category with her big showy event, but life goes on, and now she's realizing she's falling behind in every other way. It's absurd. I've never competed with her, and I genuinely don't care who's doing better. For years, our relationship was perfectly normal. We were happy for each other's accomplishments, no matter how small. We talked every day. We were friends. But people change, and for reasons I don't even fully understand, she's just not the same person anymore. And while I know exactly why that change happened, it's not like I can save everyone, especially not someone who doesn't want to be saved. She insists she's happy with her husband, and if that's true, there's nothing anyone can do. Anyway, back to the party. Apparently, my sister decided to throw a party of her own, at her house, at the exact same time. I have no idea what the occasion was or what the theme could possibly be, but she made sure to post all about it on social media. You could see her friends there, and maybe some of my brother-in-law's relatives. At first, we didn't even know she was hosting anything until she sent my mom the photos herself, just to show how much fun she was having without us. My mom showed me the messages but didn't even bother replying. That's when my sister started pushing. She texted, "What's wrong? Does it hurt to see that I don't need you anymore? You thought giving me money would make me your little puppet, wagging my tail every time you spoke." That was the last straw for my dad. He grabbed his phone and texted her himself. "If you think our money is such a burden to you, feel free to start paying it back anytime. Between your wedding and your college tuition, that's about $10,000. We can work out a payment plan that works for everyone." My dad doesn't need that money, but he's completely done with her attitude. She read the message, didn't reply, and stopped sending photos to my mom. At least that shut her up long enough for us to enjoy our party without interruptions. I later asked my dad if that amount was really accurate, and he said he wasn't sure, but it sounded about right. Either way, it did the trick. He never actually expects her to pay, but it's a good way to keep her in check. I honestly don't know what her endgame is anymore. If she keeps pushing, she's going to end up with my parents demanding every cent back, and if her life's bad now, it'll be 10 times worse with that kind of debt hanging over her. If she cared about my advice, which she doesn't, I'd tell her to drop the dead weight, meaning her useless husband, and get a real job. She'd probably be 100 times better off. Maybe then, she could even find a decent man. Update 4. I have to write this post because even I can't believe everything that's happened over these past few months, both the good and the bad. And trust me, there's plenty of both. Let's start with the bad. My sister went to my parents' house to confront them because she felt disrespected when they asked her to pay back the money they'd given her, since, according to her, they didn't ask me to. But just like I expected, my parents told her exactly what I've been saying all along, that she was being ungrateful, and if she had such a problem with the money, she could always return it. It turned into a heated argument. My sister started ranting about favoritism, which makes zero sense because both of our wedding funds were equal, we just used them differently. As for the college expenses, that depended entirely on which university we attended and what study program we chose. In fact, my parents actually spent more on her because her school was more expensive than mine. My parents had no intention of actually making her pay them back, but her pride got the best of her. She told them that she was going to start paying them immediately so she could end the relationship with them, and that once she paid back every last cent, she would never speak to either of them again. That's going to take a while, though. They agreed on the $10,000 amount, but since she can only afford $500 a month, that means 20 years of payments. Still, she's been doing it these past few months. Now for the good part, my sister is finally divorced. She actually opened her eyes about her husband and managed to get rid of him. She still runs her little business, but she also got a part-time job, probably to help supplement her income so she can keep up with the payments to our parents. I think that's the positive side, she's finally realizing what was dragging her life down. But the bad side is how she handled things with our parents. She completely destroyed that relationship simply because she couldn't admit she was wrong. She still doesn't talk to me, no surprise there, but cutting off our parents, who were actually being very reasonable, was a huge overreaction. And I know what some of you will probably say, because I've already seen it in the comments, that it's my fault for involving our parents in the first place. But honestly, it's not like they wouldn't have found out eventually. I'm sure that even without my intervention, they would have seen those party photos she sent around and asked me why she wasn't invited, or confronted her themselves, and I'm certain their reaction would have been exactly the same. So no, I don't see myself as the one to blame here, unless I try to see things through her twisted perspective. Maybe in 20 years, I'll post an update saying, my sister has finally paid off all her debts. Edit. If my math is right, judging from when we bought our house, give or take a month, my sister's been making payments for almost 2 years now. She still doesn't talk to me and barely communicates with our parents, except to let them know when she's transferred that month's payment. That's about all there is to update. Only 18 more years to go.